These steps don't just improve interactions, they lay the groundwork for cultural transformation.
Welcome to Beyond the Class, From Knowledge to Action, the audiocast that helps Chapman Foundation alumni continue the journey of applying the skills they've built and turning them into practical, intentional actions for everyday life. Every action tells a story, and how often do we see a behavior and jump to conclusions? But what if, instead of instantly reacting and creating judgments, we paused and asked ourselves, why is this happening? What's at the root of this action? Today's episode is titled, From Reacting to Understanding, the Impact of Behavioral Awareness. Making time to take a deeper look at behavior can shift the way that you see the world around you. To help break this down, I'm thrilled to have Misty Janks with us. Misty is the CEO of the Chapman Foundation for Caring Communities. She is also a thought leader and organizational psychologist who's passionate about unleashing the power and potential of individuals and organizations. Misty, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. I'm super excited to be here and explore this topic together.
All right, Misty, your blog, titled, Why Am I Behaving Like This?, starts with a bold claim that every action, reaction, and decision stems from an underlying need. To me, that's a fascinating perspective. Can you break down where this belief comes from, and is there any science that backs this up?
Yes, Adam. Across disciplines, psychology consistently affirms that human behavior is not random or purely oppositional. It is purposeful and need-driven. A couple of examples here are from nonviolent communication, and this is built on the principle that all behavior is an attempt to meet a universal human need. It refrains judgment and actions not as good or bad, but as expressions of need that may or may not be met skillfully. The second one that I would mention comes from behavioral psychology, and that's the functional behavioral analysis, where from a behavioralist lens, every behavior serves as a function. It is to help us gain something that we need. So every behavior is an expression of need is strongly supported across psychological disciplines. Recognizing behavior through the lens of unmet needs fosters empathy, connection, and more effective support strategies in the workplace, schools, and our communities.
So the idea that we should see behavior not as good or bad, but as a window into an unmet need is interesting and pretty intriguing to me. Can you help us understand that idea with some examples?
Certainly. Here's a couple of examples that can help us really have this concept come to life for us. So first, when someone seems unmotivated at work, it might not mean that they're lazy. They might be searching for meaningful work or craving attention. But all too times, we jumped to judging that behavior first. Mm-hmm. Another example, maybe a team member who frequently interrupts, maybe expressing a need to be heard or valued. Maybe they feel like they're not being seen in that meeting or have that opportunity to really have what they're trying to say be heard. A third example is when a colleague resists change. They might be trying to fulfill their need for security or trust or a little bit of control.
I'd like to jump in right and say, as a higher S tendency, my need for stability causes me to not resist change, but bring change about slowly. And that's an identifying factor for myself that in the last probably 2 to 3 years, I've really started to realize and become okay with. And so that way I know now it might take me time and I know that I'm going to get there. But even that realization also helps me move a little faster sometimes to say, okay, you're moving a little slow and you know why. How can you move this along? Because people might be waiting on me to move a little faster.
What I love about that story, Adam, is you are taking awareness to action. So you are using some of those skills that we learn in the classes that we teach, like DISC, and understanding, okay, if I'm this tendency, I have these needs and my overextensions look like this. And so when I start to see that behavior surface for myself, I can pause and be like, where is this coming from? What do I actually need? And how do I make the best decision for myself in this moment with that information?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm being very blunt and honest. It's not always the easiest, but that's why we're here learning some of these skills, right?
Absolutely. When we look beyond the surface of behavior and approach it with curiosity, we start uncovering the needs that drive it.
I do love that mindset shift into curiosity and trying not to label behavior as immediately good or bad, right? And one of the most thought provoking segments I thought in your blog is about making that mindset shift. What more can you add to that?
Mindset shifts can be difficult, and asking you to see the behavior and not judge can be easier said than done, especially when that behavior angers or annoys us. But I encourage our listeners to pause and ask themselves two key questions when faced with challenging behavior. These questions are simple but very effective when applied intentionally. The first question, what might this person need right now? And the second, how can I support that need in a constructive way? This is about leading and responding with intention. It's about addressing the core issue, not just reacting to the symptom. And it's important to recognize this doesn't mean excusing poor behavior. Instead, this is about understanding, responding with empathy and clarity, and addressing the behavior.
Before we talk about that empathy you just mentioned in there, in question number 2, you specifically stated it as responding to that need in a constructive way. Can you expand on that?
Yes. So the example that I would use here is if you have a coworker coming to you and they are visibly upset about something. And you can see that. So they have a need to kind of vent that emotion around an issue. You helping in a constructive way is not going to be adding to that fire, right? And be like, oh, and start gossiping or venting or whatever it is and piling on. Instead, it will be to listen, reflectively respond, and help them vent all of that emotion so they can get back to that balanced state to be able to make better decisions. So helping in a constructive way.
I also think it reminds me of not taking on others' problems in a situation like that, right? So it also can be constructive for them and not destructive for yourself, right? That you're not taking on more than you might need in the situation.
Absolutely. Always letting the problem owner keep that problem. You're just there to be that sounding board.
Towards the end of the statement there, you mentioned about responding with empathy. And I love the reminder as we talk about our empathetic listening skills often, and that's our foundation in our community listens. But I tell you, man, responding with empathy with 3 kids under 10 sometimes is really hard. And to stay curious in moments when they're rebelling against just the simplest things like getting ready for school and they don't want to get their socks on. And man, it's just like, just put your socks on. I don't need to know why you don't want to put your socks on. We need to go. But that curiosity is hard, and it's much easier to, go to that space of judgment. But I think it would be healthy if I took that time sometimes to say, are they acting this way because they're worried about a test? Or are they worried about recess? Are they worried about other things that maybe they've brought up that I've not made that connection? Even when that's difficult, why is that curiosity important? Why does curiosity matter in our relationships and workplaces?
When we stay curious, we can do several things. First, we can build trust by responding to needs rather than judging actions. Second, we can create a culture of learning by encouraging open conversations about what's going on. Third, we can strengthen connections by showing empathy and understanding. And finally, we can increase engagement by aligning activities with what genuinely matters to people. Shifting from judgment to curiosity isn't just helpful, it can make a lasting impact on how we lead and connect.
Man, those are great reminders to keep in mind when I need to connect with my girls in the morning, and maybe they're just tired. So I'll keep that in mind. But you mentioned there about how we lead, right? So speaking of leadership, your blog continues on, and it highlights how this shift in perspective can be especially empowering for leaders. Can you expand on why understanding the needs behind the behavior is so critical for leaders?
Of course. First, leaders aren't just managing tasks. They're working to understand people. Recognizing behavior as communication fosters trust and strengthens team dynamics. And this approach helps create cultures of learning where people can grow and dialogue is valued. When leaders take this approach, they create environments where individuals feel heard, valued, and empowered to contribute.
Your first bullet point there, leaders are not just managing tasks, they're working to understand people. Again, we say this and it's easier said than done, right? What are some other tools that help leaders understand people?
First, I would say that the initial step in knowing others better is to first know ourselves well. There are many ways that we can do this, and there's lots of tools to help us understand and know ourselves and others better. Tools like values exploration, understanding what is shaping you and your experiences and your mindsets that ultimately are driving your behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
There's Strengths Finder, which helps us build on an individual's natural talents. There's also DISC that we've already mentioned, which measures behavioral tendencies and really helps us know what are our needs, what are our fears, what are our overextensions that can show up. There's also emotional intelligence, which focuses in on self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and relationship management. There's a huge component in our Community Serves curriculum for that. And then skills like listening and empathy can also help. Our organization does offer a half-day DISC program if anyone is interested in participating.
So that half-day DISC program could be a couple things, right? If you've already taken our classes and you're an alumni listening, that half-day DISC could be a refresher. But I think it would also be a potential door opener for new staff members who maybe haven't taken lessons or anything else. Have you seen that utilized for organizations, and what do you normally see by the end of that?
Yes. So just like you said, you have the opportunity to take the DISC component in our community listens, or you could do a standalone dedicated session. And then after your team completes that initial DISC training, we also have what we call DISC in teams. And so this takes a deep dive, and we shift the lens from just being about us to being about our full team, and how do we see all of these tendencies showing up? Where are our strengths? Where are our blind spots? How can we collaborate together? So you get a big disc diamond and everyone is charted up on that diamond. And with that, you get to more understanding. I now know how to style flex to you. I now know why maybe you only respond to me in short bullet points. It's not that you're mad or upset. You're just direct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. I oftentimes, in lots of conversations that I've had with organizations, and I talk to multiple people within the organization, I hear them talking about how they utilize DISC often. I know it's a great tool. So we've talked about recognizing others' behaviors, and we've talked a bit about recognizing our own. How can we start reflecting on understanding the needs of our own actions?
Great question, Adam. This really starts with self-awareness. It is important to first have the awareness and curiosity about your own behavior, and then pause. This will give you the time to reflect and ask yourself, why am I acting this way or having this response? What is driving this behavior for me? Is it tied to a value or a belief I hold? And when you can pause and identify your own needs, you can increase your emotional intelligence and act in a mindful and productive way.
So if we do that and we identify our needs, is it fair to, I don't know, at times when we feel like it might be appropriate to, straight up tell others what our needs are?
Yes, please. This will help you get your needs met more effectively and efficiently. Most of the time, people just are not aware what's really driving that behavior. So if you already know, that's the most efficient way to get your needs met.
I do think about that coming up a little more often in personal relationships, maybe in, significant other situations where you may be expecting your significant other to know what you want for X holiday or whatever. But I think at times it's very loving to say, well, you know what? I don't necessarily need something. I want time, or I want such and such, or I'm just looking for this type of connection.
Yes, the example that comes up for me happened over our dinner table last night. My husband was being kind and asked me, hey, did you finish what you needed to on your dissertation? Or did you finish your dissertation? And I was like, stop asking me that question. I'm not going to be done for a year. And I snapped back and then I was like, ooh, why did I do that?
Yeah.
I was feeling stressed. I have my first chapter due by Sunday and it's not done yet. And so that realization in the moment, I was like, ooh. And I thought to myself, what is happening? I'm like, I'm stressed because of the timeline. And then I said, it is going to take me a year to finish this. Can you please start adjusting your questions to be, did you finish what you needed to today? Because then I don't feel as overwhelmed.
And if he takes that in, and I bet he does, and that kind of helps then the two of you shift and create expectations to communicate.
Yes, and I won't be so snappy.
Yeah, and in time, as you start to execute things, that's also going to help, and that's something you know about yourself too. All right, Misty, as we wrap up our conversation, we've covered a lot. So I'm going to ask you to do your best to summarize and provide our listeners with some clear steps that they can take. What actionable takeaways would you suggest to help them start applying these ideas right away?
All right, here are the 3 key steps that anyone can implement. First is to shift from judgment to curiosity. When someone's behavior challenges you, pause and ask, what need might they be expressing to me right now? Number 2 is to lead with empathy and emotional awareness. Respond with intention rather than reacting. Seek to understand before trying to fix the situation. And then finally, number 3, reflect on your own needs. Remember that your behavior also tells a story. Take time to ask yourself, what is driving this behavior for me? These steps don't just improve interactions, they lay the groundwork for cultural transformation, whether that's in a workplace or personal relationship.
Thank you, Misty, for walking us through this insightful and actionable framework. Your perspective that every behavior tells a story gives us all a lot to think about.
Thank you so much for having me on, Adam. It's always great to speak with you and our listeners.
For our listeners, if you want to learn more and explore how to bring this understanding into your organization, visit chapmancommunities.org. You'll find resources, tools, and opportunities to partner with Misty and our team. And don't forget to subscribe to Beyond the Class so you stay up to date with more thought-provoking episodes just like this one. Until next time, I'm Adam Salgat, inviting you to walk your path with intention because you are the message. Take care, my friends.